You step into the forest, and instantly the air changes. The silence feels heavier, as though the trees themselves are holding their breath. Moss-covered branches twist above like ancient hands, and every shadow seems to move when you're not looking. This isn't just any woodland. These are the most cursed forests in the UK. Places where whispers linger, legends breathe, and something unseen may already be walking beside you. Wistman's Wood. You begin your journey in the heart of Dartmoor, where the landscape is already strange. Rolling hills stretch into mist, granite tors jut like ancient monuments, and the wind whistles with a sound that never feels entirely natural. But tucked high on a slope above the West Dart River is a woodland so uncanny, so otherworldly, that for centuries it has been whispered about in fearful tones. This is Wistman's Wood. From the first step inside, you feel as though you've crossed into another realm. The trees here are not the tall, proud oaks seen in other English forests. They are dwarfed and twisted, their trunks gnarled like contorted limbs, their branches clawing against each other, as though frozen mid-struggle. Each is draped in a thick pelt of moss, with lichen dripping like cobwebs from every bough. The ground is a chaos of boulders, each one slick with emerald green, forcing any visitor to step carefully, as if the forest itself is testing their presence. The name alone sets the tone. Wistman is believed to come from the old Devonshire word wisht, meaning eerie, uncanny, or pixie-haunted. For locals, the very word warns you. This is not a place for the careless. The stories of hauntings here are as old as the trees themselves, stretching back through centuries of oral tradition, their roots just as tangled as the forest floor. Perhaps the most enduring legend is of the wished hounds, hellish black dogs with eyes like burning coals, jaws foaming, and a hunger for souls. They are said to hunt through Wistman's Wood at night, led by the spectral figure of the wild huntsman himself. In medieval lore, the wild hunt was a terrifying omen, a cavalcade of ghostly riders and hounds thundering across the sky or through the trees, often presaging death or disaster. In Dartmoor, they say the hunt begins here, bursting from the wood to sweep across the moor, chasing down any mortal foolish enough to be out after dark. Those who claim to have heard it describe the sound of pounding hooves, the baying of hounds, and a rush of wind that rattles the branches. But when they look up, there is nothing but mist. The forest has long been tied to darker practices as well. Whispers of druidic rituals cling to these trees, suggesting that in ancient times, sacrifices were made here. While no hard evidence survives, the very atmosphere of the place seems to encourage such speculation. Standing in a clearing, with the oaks closing in like a natural amphitheater, it is easy to imagine robed figures chanting in the half-light, their voices echoing between the rocks. Whether those practices were ever real or simply stories born from fear, they have cemented the wood's reputation as a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Travel writers of the 18th and 19th centuries described Wistman's Wood with fascination tinged by dread. One early visitor noted that the forest felt as though it had stood since the world began, untouched by axe or saw. Indeed, scientists now believe parts of the wood may be remnants of the vast temperate rainforest that once cloaked much of Britain thousands of years ago. Walking here, you're not just seeing old trees, You're stepping into a living fragment of the prehistoric past, and perhaps it's that uncanny sense of time, millennia compressed into a few acres, that feeds the unease. The stories don't stop with the hounds. Locals also speak of phantom figures glimpsed between the trees, hunters clad in ancient garb, monks wandering silently, and shadowy shapes that vanish when approached. Some believe the spirits are drawn here by the stones that litter the ground, boulders associated with long-forgotten rituals, their surfaces marked by the passing of countless centuries. Others think the forest itself is alive, aware, and unwilling to let go of those who step too deep within its grasp. And then there are the accounts of sudden terror. Visitors describe the uncanny feeling of being watched, of eyes tracking them through the gloom. Some speak of being paralyzed by dread, unable to move forward or back, as though the forest is holding them in place. One tale tells of a man who tried to cross the wood at dusk. As the light faded, he heard low growls circling him, though he saw nothing. Panicked, he scrambled over boulders and tore through bracken until he emerged, bruised and shaken, certain he had escaped being hunted by something not of this world. Even in the daylight, the unease never fully lifts. The canopy is broken, letting shafts of light cut through the mist, yet the shadows always seem to dominate. Birds are strangely absent. The silence presses in, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen movement. Every crooked branch, every rock shrouded in moss, feels like part of a larger pattern, one you can sense but not understand. Scientists might explain the fear as psychological, the disorienting terrain, the claustrophobic tangle of trees, the oppressive silence. But that explanation doesn't stop the legends. If anything, it makes them stronger. Because if the forest alone can inspire such fear, what happens when the stories are true? Wistman's Wood remains a magnet for the curious, the brave, and the foolhardy. Some come searching for the wished hounds, others for evidence of ancient rituals. Most leave with nothing more than photographs of moss-draped branches. Yet time and again, people report the same unsettling feeling, that they were not alone, that something unseen and patient moved just beyond the corner of their vision. And perhaps that is Wistman's greatest curse, not the hounds, nor the ghosts, but the knowledge that in this forest, you are never simply walking among trees. You are trespassing on ground that remembers every story, every ritual, every whispered prayer of fear. And as you step away, out into the open air of the moor, you cannot help but wonder, did you leave Wistman's Wood behind, or did something follow you south? Epping Forest. You're standing on the edge of Epping Forest, just 15 miles from the very heart of London. By daylight, it looks inviting. Oak and beech trees stretching in gentle waves, green light flickering between the leaves. Families picnic here, joggers carve out morning trails, and cyclists fly by on narrow paths. But when the sun dips, the forest becomes something else entirely. Shadows multiply, the air thickens, and centuries of whispered stories stir awake. Epping Forest has long been called London's most haunted woodland, and with good reason. For over 400 years, this tangle of trees has been a place of hiding, betrayal, and restless spirits. It is here that outlaws once waited for unwary travelers, where executions echoed between the branches, and where apparitions still roam, shrouded in mystery and bound by a past that refuses to fade. The most infamous of them all is a name etched into British folklore: Dick Turpin, the notorious highwayman of the 18th century. History paints him as a ruthless criminal, yet legend transformed him into a folk hero. In life, Turpin terrorized the roads leading into London, and in death, many claim he never left. Visitors wandering through the forest at dusk have described hearing the pounding of hooves on soft earth, hoofbeats that vanish into silence. Others swear they've seen a lone rider moving quickly between the trees, only for the figure to dissolve into mist. His ghost, it's said, still stalks the same paths he once ruled, forever riding, forever hunted. But Turpin is far from the only spirit tied to this land. One of the eeriest tales is of a headless apparition that drifts silently through the undergrowth. Witnesses describe a man's body in ragged clothing, stumbling as if in endless pain, yet his head is nowhere to be seen. Some link him to the bloody executions once carried out nearby, when criminals were brought into the forest for justice that was swift and merciless. Decapitation was a punishment meant to end life, but here it seems to have birthed something that lingers still. Even those who don't see anything often feel it. Hikers have reported sudden drops in temperature, icy blasts of air so sharp it feels like someone exhaling on their neck. Strange laughter has carried across empty glades, and in the silence, footsteps are heard following close behind, only to stop the moment the traveler pauses. Imagine walking through the darkness with only the crunch of leaves beneath your boots, then realizing there's a second rhythm matching yours. It isn't just folklore fueling these accounts. Paranormal investigators have flocked to Epping Forest for decades, hoping to capture evidence of what lurks in its shadows. One of the most infamous nights came during a live broadcast of Most Haunted. The crew ventured deep into the woods, only to be overwhelmed by disembodied noises, knocks against trees, and a growing sense that something was closing in on them. Cameras shook, whispers filled the microphones, and at one point, the crew became lost in the endless thicket. They were eventually guided out by a forest ranger at dawn, shaken, pale, and unable to explain what they had endured. The chilling part, their experience mirrors what countless locals have reported privately for years. Some describe the forest as a trap, a place that confuses the senses. Paths appear to change, familiar landmarks vanish, and even the most seasoned walkers find themselves turned around, as if the woods themselves are twisting to keep them inside. There are darker rumors, too, stories that the forest holds not just echoes of the past, but imprints of tragedy. Over the decades, Epping Forest has been a dumping ground for secrets best left buried, murders, hidden crimes, desperate souls, all of it feeding into an atmosphere heavy with sorrow and dread. Perhaps that's why so many spirits cling to this place. Perhaps the roots themselves have soaked up the pain, storing it like a poison that leaks into anyone who dares to wander too deep. And then there are the lights. Dozens of accounts speak of strange orbs glowing between the trees, blue, white, sometimes red, floating at eye level, swaying in silence. Some believe these are the spirits of travelers who never made it out. Others think they're warnings, guiding the living away from danger. But the most unsettling detail is how they behave, often flickering just far enough ahead to lure someone deeper, deeper into the woods. And once followed, the lights vanish, leaving only darkness. Every element of Epping Forest seems designed to blur the line between the natural and the supernatural. Even the landscape conspires in its mystery. Dense pockets of trees swallow sound, while sudden clearings appear like stages set for ghostly reenactments. On foggy nights, trunks loom like sentinels, and branches claw at the sky. The forest feels alive, aware, and waiting. What keeps these legends alive is not just the tales themselves, but the consistency of the fear. Generations separated by centuries all describe the same things: the rider, the headless figure, the footsteps, the whispers. Skeptics call it imagination, tricks of light, the brain misfiring in stress. But for those who have stepped into Epping after dark, the feeling is undeniable. Something moves here. Something watches. Something lingers. And as you leave the forest, emerging back onto the roads lit with the glow of London's sprawl, the questions cling to you like the mist. Were those footsteps real? Was the rider's shadow just the play of branches? Or did you, without realizing it, cross paths with the restless dead still patrolling the forest's heart? Because in Epping, the past is never silent. And if you listen closely, you might just hear it calling your name. Wychwood Forest. In the rolling countryside of Oxfordshire, not far from the dreaming spires of Oxford itself, lies a stretch of woodland that seems ordinary at first glance. By day, Wychwood Forest is a quiet refuge, deer stepping carefully across shaded paths, wildflowers blooming in the clearings, and shafts of sunlight pouring through the trees. But when dusk falls, the atmosphere thickens. A chill creeps in, and stories as old as the forest itself begin to stir. This is Wychwood, a place where folklore and tragedy intertwine so deeply that the living cannot help but sense the weight of the dead. The name alone conjures an air of mystery. Wychwood derives from the Old English Wychwood, meaning the forest of the Wyche people. But many hear in it the whisper of Wychwood, a name that feels fitting given the chilling legends tied to its soil. One of the oldest and most persistent tales is that of the ghostly cart, a spectral horse-drawn wagon said to rumble through the forest, carrying crying children. Witnesses describe the sound first: the creak of wheels over uneven ground, the clatter of hooves striking a path where no horse should be. Then, through the mist, a cart appears. Inside sit pale, spectral figures, children weeping silently as the wagon jolts forward, pulled by horses that cast no shadow. The apparition drifts into view and then vanishes, leaving behind only the echo of sorrow. The origins of this story remain uncertain, but many believe it is a memory of past tragedies that scarred the land. The forest was once far larger than it is today, stretching across Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire. And for centuries it was home to hunting parties, travellers, and outlaws. Children lost here might never be found. Famines, plagues, and poverty left countless little ones abandoned to the elements. Some locals say the ghostly cart carries the souls of those children still, forever wandering roads that no longer exist. But Wychwood's hauntings are not confined to nameless spirits. One of its most infamous tales is tied to history itself. In the 16th century, Lady Amy Robsart, the wife of Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, and a favourite of Queen Elizabeth I, died under mysterious circumstances. She was found lifeless at the bottom of a staircase, her death officially deemed an accident. Yet rumors quickly spread. Whispers of murder, conspiracy, and ambition, suggesting her husband sought freedom to marry the Queen. It is here, in Wychwood Forest, that Amy's spirit is said to wander still. For centuries there have been reports of her ghost appearing before travelers, pale, solemn, and veiled in sorrow. The most unsettling part of the legend is not her presence, but the message she carries. Those who encounter Amy Robsart's apparition are said to be marked for death. Within days of her appearance, the witness falls ill or suffers some unexpected fate. One of the earliest accounts tells of a huntsman who swore he saw her standing by the trees, her eyes fixed on him with mournful intensity. Within a fortnight, the man was dead. Another story describes a woodcutter who came face to face with a woman in Tudor dress. He returned home shaken, insisting she had spoken no words, but conveyed an unshakable sadness. Days later, he collapsed and never rose again. Over the years, the pattern repeated enough times that locals came to fear even the mention of Amy's ghost. To see her was to know your time was nearly done. Beyond individual tales, the forest itself carries a reputation for disorienting those who enter. Walkers have described paths that shift, landmarks that seem to move, and sudden mists that roll in without warning. Some believe this is simply the natural trickery of dense woodland, but others suggest it is the work of spirits leading mortals astray. A chilling notion persists that the cart, the ghostly children, and Amy Robsart are all part of the same haunting, bound to a place where sorrow has soaked into the very earth. There is a psychological element to Wychwood's dread as well. Forests are liminal spaces, boundaries between civilization and wilderness. In medieval times, Wychwood was a royal hunting ground, guarded and protected, but also feared. Stray too far into its depths, and you might meet poachers, bandits, or worse. Over generations, the fear of the unknown became infused with stories of the supernatural, until the forest itself seemed alive with restless souls. Even today, modern visitors report strange experiences. Drivers on nearby roads have glimpsed figures crossing in the night, only to vanish in their headlights. Hikers speak of sudden chills, of feeling watched by unseen eyes. And then there are the recurring sounds, hoofbeats on empty paths, wheels crunching over ground that has long since grown wild. Skeptics dismiss these as tricks of the mind, imagination sharpened by silence and shadow. Yet the persistence of the stories, repeated across centuries, suggests something deeper. Why do so many accounts converge on the same themes? Sorrow, omens of death, ghostly wheels and hooves. Why does Amy Robsart's story refuse to fade, centuries after her death? Perhaps it is because Wychwood embodies a truth that frightens us most, that grief and injustice do not vanish with time. They remain, lingering like the mist between the trees, waiting for us to stumble across them. And if you do walk Wychwood after dark and hear the distant creak of wheels on an unseen path, remember this: those who turn their heads to look often wish they hadn't. Because in the forest's silence, sorrow travels fast, and sometimes it travels straight toward you. Windsor Forest and New Forest. The forests of England are old, older than castles and kings, older than the stories whispered about them. And some of those stories travel, not bound to one place, but riding the wind itself. Among the most chilling is the legend of the Wild Hunt, a spectral cavalcade of riders and hounds said to thunder through the night sky, bringing terror and ruin in its wake. In the UK, two forests in particular echo with this legend: Windsor Forest in Berkshire and the sprawling New Forest to the south. The story begins in Windsor, a place best known for its royal castle, but just beyond the walls lies Windsor Great Park and Forest, land steeped in centuries of lore. Here, amid the ancient oaks and tangled groves, stalks a figure that has haunted English imagination for generations: Herne the Hunter. Herne is described as a ghostly man, cloaked and wild-eyed, crowned with antlers like a stag. At night, he appears with chains clattering from his arms, sometimes alone, sometimes leading a spectral host. Local legend says he was once a royal huntsman in the service of King Richard II. Betrayed by jealous rivals, Herne was disgraced and cast out. In despair, he rode into the forest and hanged himself from an oak tree. But death brought no peace. Instead, his spirit returned, fused with the wild power of the woods. Now, he rides beneath the moon with his phantom hounds, a guardian to some, a terror to others. For centuries, Windsor locals claimed to see him galloping between the trees, horns glinting in moonlight. Shakespeare himself immortalized the tale in The Merry Wives of Windsor, describing Herne as a ghost who haunts the Forest of Windsor, shaking chains and frightening the unwary. Even today, rangers and night walkers report the same sounds: rattling metal, hoofbeats pounding on soil, a rush of wind as though an invisible host has surged past. But Windsor is not the only home of the hunt. Travel south to Hampshire, and you'll find the New Forest, a landscape created by William the Conqueror in the 11th century as his private hunting ground. With its sweeping heathlands, dense thickets, and ancient trees, it has long been called one of the most haunted regions in Britain. The New Forest's ghostly tales are countless: spectral monks, phantom riders, shadowy figures crossing roads at night. But woven through them all is the sense of something larger, something restless that roams the skies and paths alike. The wild hunt is said to pass over these woods, its hounds baying, its riders shrieking, a storm of spirits that sweeps the land. Locals warn that to hear the hunt is an omen: illness, disaster, or death soon to follow. Some accounts tell of travelers hearing the thunder of hooves, only to find the ground beneath their feet trembling, though no horse is in sight. Others claim the trees themselves shake, their branches rattling, though the night air is still. And then come the dogs, huge, black, with glowing eyes, sprinting in silence until they vanish as quickly as they appeared. Historians trace the wild hunt back to ancient European mythology. In Norse sagas, it was Odin who led the hunt. In German folklore, it was a cursed lord or a demonic figure. In England, it became Herne, or nameless hosts rushing across the land. Always, the pattern remains: spectral riders, otherworldly hounds, a warning carried on the wind. What is striking is how consistent these stories are, even across borders, as if people across centuries were all glimpsing the same terror in the night sky. But why forests? Perhaps because forests are thresholds, places where the rules of ordinary life dissolve. By day, they're filled with bird song and sunlight. By night, they become endless walls of shadow, each tree a potential sentinel, each rustle a threat. They are natural stages for the imagination to conjure figures riding between the trunks, shapes moving where no one should be. The New Forest's reputation for death adds fuel to the stories. Both King William II, known as William Rufus, and his brother Richard met their ends within its bounds, struck down by arrows in what many believe were more than mere hunting accidents. Their sudden deaths in the forest gave rise to centuries of superstition. That the land itself demanded blood, that the hunt claimed kings as easily as peasants. Even now some say their spirits ride with the host, trapped forever in the chase. Travelers who have dared to stay overnight in the New Forest often speak of a growing dread. The night grows still, the air thick, and then, faintly at first, comes the sound: hooves, baying hounds, wind tearing through branches though no storm brews. And if you are truly unlucky, a figure appears at the tree line, antlered, chained, eyes burning like coals. Whether you run or freeze, it makes no difference. By the time you gather your senses, the vision is gone, leaving silence so profound it presses into your chest. Skeptics argue that the wild hunt is nothing more than myth, storms mistaken for hooves, owls for cries, imagination feeding fear. But for those who have heard the sound in the woods, for those who have seen the shapes in the trees, explanation doesn't matter. What matters is the feeling that the world you know has thinned and something older, wilder, and merciless has slipped through. From Windsor's shadowed groves to the vast sweep of the New Forest, the legend of the hunt refuses to die. It adapts, it endures, it rides still. And perhaps that is what chills the blood most of all, that somewhere, in the whisper of chains or the sudden rush of wind through the branches, the hunt is already upon you. And if you hear it, remember the old warning: do not follow, do not call out, do not look too long, because the hunt is not simply passing through, it is always searching. And one night it may be searching for you. Chained Oak. On the edge of Alton in Staffordshire stands a tree unlike any other. Its branches are old, twisted and heavy, but bound in rusting iron chains. This is the Chained Oak, a relic of fear, legend, and death. The story begins in the 1820s with the Earl of Shrewsbury. One stormy night, his carriage was halted by a beggar woman who begged for aid. The Earl refused. In anger, she cursed him. "For every branch that falls from the oak, a member of your family shall die." That very night, a branch snapped in the storm. By morning, a family member was dead. Terrified, the Earl ordered the oak bound in iron, each limb shackled to stop another fall. But chains cannot silence legend. Over the years, locals whispered that the curse continued. Travelers told of a shadowy woman at the tree, her form bent, her eyes hidden. Some spoke of groans from the branches when no wind stirred, followed by the clink of chains like warning bells. Even now, the oak inspires unease. Visitors report sudden chills, drained camera batteries, or strange blurs in photographs. Some claim the bark itself feels warm, pulsing, alive. And when branches have fallen in the past, stories spread quickly of tragedies shadowing the Shrewsbury family soon after. Coincidence, perhaps, or the curse at work. The Chained Oak's infamy grew when it inspired the Alton Towers ride hex, turning the tale into entertainment. But beyond the theatrics, the oak still stands, its chains rusting, its silence heavy. Birds rarely perch in its canopy. The air feels still, watchful. And the most unsettling truth remains. 200 years on, no one dares unbind it. If the curse was nothing but folklore, why does the tree remain shackled in iron? Perhaps the Earl's terror lingers still, a warning echoing across generations. The chained oak is more than wood and metal. It is a living reminder that arrogance, cruelty, and fear can outlast centuries. To stand beneath its shadow is to feel the weight of history pressing down, and to wonder if another branch fell tonight, whose fate would be sealed.